Yeah. Yes.
Well, it needs to be in order, like it needs to be the same on the sheet as they're speaking. So now it's in the same order as on the sheet.
Yeah, but they're speaking in German.
Well, then we need to change this.
We need to change the sheets to the speaking.
It needs to be in the same order.
That's wrong. There's an L. There's an extra L.
Yeah,
It might be too late, but
Yep.
Do you think we have time, Deb, or should I just use a pen?
I think we have time.
Let's just can you put me grab all of this? Yes. Like, no, he just told me like it's not a big deal, but hey, card. Is your boss cool? Like, see anything? He's got the statement and everything. Print it out.
He's good.
You're right. It's pretty verbatim. Swidan is very strong in one lady. She says things a certain way, but that doesn't mean your boss has to do it.
But most of the she's on like and the other thing is I sent this to Sweden because you're sitting with she's
It's smart to live that.
well, just in case they wanted to like somehow like clear the air or something.
Yeah.
Which again, and then the time. Yeah, he's good. Thanks for doing this. I don't know whose idea this is.
Oh, it was a joint idea, but yeah, I'm glad he's here. I wish Miss Swidan could be here, but obviously better to have your boss than no one at all. How about your boss? Is he good?
Yeah, he's
You
good.
got the statement and everything?
Yeah, that's right here.
Okay.
Swap.
Yeah, we did a little swap.
There you go. Yeah, the two of us each other. So how long have you been working in the office?
I've been with Mr. Cloud for 2 years, over 2 years. So and then before that, just 3 years in multimedia delegation. So, yeah. What about you?
What? I came here like since January, so
Okay.
very new.
Nice. Okay. So you were at the State Department before that, or the Thai version?
That's right, Thai State Department.
Thai.
So we have like this kind of program that start like 60s.
Yeah.
Like so we have she's like bring kind of implements like Congress to learn from all of us. So it started since then like so long ago. Back then there's supposed to be like more like Southeast Asian countries, but now it's solely Thailand.
She's Thailand.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. So, I've only been asked this so many times. There's this like this bit that a lot of Thai restaurants are
Well, not really. Actually, I confirm that.
yeah.
But we I call like this program called like that is almost like launch this program called ICE. Yeah, so it's kind of like very good for the restaurant. Like yeah, this is it's approved by Thai. Something like that. So
I need to look at that list because before I moved to DC, I've never had Thai food. But when I did move here, a friend of mine
Yeah, honestly,
like
just like
you live in the city.
rest with
it's that
So that's correct. In DVR.
too far away.
Yeah.
So I just updated.
So where do you go for Thai food?
Bill's here,
Oh,
though.
somewhere near.
Harry was here.
I went to this one. It's free. It's called Bansaya.
Takes it to my wife.
Let's get ahead of the
Yeah, this one's good. It's located around
Yeah.
at the so very close to it's called Bansaya.
So that one's really good.
Yeah, it's good for myself in the city.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to go for like you have to go outside DC. So to Virginia side where like lots of tech communities.
I would really like this sometimes.
So where would you?
But I think if you want to start with the one in DC, I think this one's
What about it? Because I live in Virginia.
oh, right. Okay, so
This was
I just want to see if my favorite
Corbett built
has
here,
to reflect.
also Corbett.
I think it's called rice.
So back to just finished up change it last name. You get any info back? It's just like it's making confusing thing. This
Bill McCarran type called technique.
just change it.
Yeah, this one place like I went to, they make bread so authentic. Like usually the office people would eat it. Like yeah, the bread is so good.
What time does your boss meet leave?
He was going to leave after
stay.
Sorry.
He can stay.
Wally
till the
first and
end.
Arthur.
Right now he's last, so I just want to
Yeah.
make sure does that work for him?
Yeah, well, like, he may have some checking. He'll be here
They can
when
also,
everybody's.
I mean,
But the plan is for him to stay until everyone's gone.
He said he can stay.
Everyone's stuff. It's like you say this stuff.
Yeah.
Because yeah. So yeah, let me just.
We're just. I felt like for me. It's good to see you.
All right. But I think it's not actually. Well, yeah, technically which name. So me as Alexander.
Well, that's where I live. This is Alexandria.
last name check.
If I can share it to you, but I think you all you take photo of like.
I'll send it. I'm gonna type it right now. All rice.
Yep, all rice time.
Oh, that would be fun. Okay.
So this is good. It's called like container chicken. So
I can do that now.
it's a down title. So it's very good.
Where's Corbett?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is also pretty good too.
No.
Sweden goes with like curry.
Wow.
They're actually like frozen like this. So, like,
Interesting. Wow, that's cool. I wanted to
well, not the biggest on the TV. I think probably smaller. Tea, I guess probably like the closest probably like almost tea. Like Taiwan. So Thailand. That's not so we like I get imported stuff.
Right. Oh.
He's like, he was not able to come. He's like,
National hostage now for detained thing. Is it Jason Rezai, right? Jason
no, Jason Pavel.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Jason.
So many things. Was he on your desk too?
Talked to him a lot about it, so he is pretty familiar with it. And he, every now and then, maybe will,
Yeah.
he might have a little bit of catch up on other things.
Some of those people.
I think someone was detained.
Oh. Like where's her? She put this together.
just talk. I get so nervous I forget my own name. No, you're a pro. You don't know.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I want to thank my colleagues for paying attention to this important issue as well. I am going to defer any remarks on myself other than to say it's an important issue to speak about and keep in the face of everybody, Americans detained abroad. It is something that we constantly pay a very vigilant attention to, the chairman, Chairman McCall, and I'm going to now yield to my colleague and friend, Mr. French Hill, who did all of the heavy lifting in putting this roundtable together, and just say thank you, Mr. Hill, for every bit of work that you put in on this, not just for this roundtable, but consistently throughout your time in Congress, and you are recognized, my friend.
Chairman Mast, thank you, and Chairman McCall, thanks for your persistent leadership on behalf of Americans wrongfully detained or held abroad. First, let me start out before I do some opening comments and welcome our families and provide some introductions for the family members that are here on this very tough, emotional day for them. Anna Corbett, her husband Ryan, is a humanitarian aid worker. He's been in prison in Afghanistan since August 2022. Ryan's the father of 3 kids, and he's been away from his family for 600 days. Debra Tice, her son Austin, a freelance journalist and Marine Corps veteran, was kidnapped in Syria in 2012. This August will mark his 12th and hopefully final year away from home. My dear friend Maryam Kamalmaz, her father Majd is a Texas psychologist who traveled to Syria back in February 2017 to treat refugees, establish a clinic. And a day after arriving, he was stopped in a checkpoint outside Damascus and has not been seen since. Gazelle Sharmahd, her father Jimmy, is an Iranian-German journalist and software developer, has been detained by the Iranian regime since 2020. Pavel Butorin, his wife, Alsu, has been unjustly imprisoned in Russia since last October on the charge that she failed to register as a foreign agent. A journalist and a mother of 2, Alsu, is accused of failing to register her U.S. passport when traveling to Russia to visit her elderly mother. In addition, we have other representatives speaking on behalf of other detained Americans whose family members could not be here today. These include the mother of Mark Swidan, who's detained in China, the wife of Tigran Gambaryan, who is detained in Nigeria, and the wife of Mark Fogel, who is detained in Russia. With that, Mr. Chairman, let me deliver some brief opening comments. I want to thank the courage of the families for coming here today and for their persistent advocacy to the Congress and to the administration and around the world on behalf of our American families held abroad. Having a loved one hostage abroad is unimaginable, and it's a heartbreaking, unimaginable, heartbreaking circumstance for these families, and one that few Americans truly know. I'm proud of the United States in the House for strongly believing in the responsibility that we have to advocate on behalf of the quick and prompt release for these held abroad hostages, but also on behalf of the families to make sure they get the information and support from the State Department. That's a goal that our government can do, which is act effectively and in time ensure that instances like they're going through are rarer and rarer for the American people. According to the James Foley Legacy Foundation, there are now 50 publicly known Americans wrongfully detained or held abroad. I really can't imagine the pain those families are going through, and over the last few years, particularly with the Kamalmaz family, I've spent time with these families and to feel their pain, which is why in 2021, I helped create the Congressional Task Force on Americans Wrongfully Detained Abroad with former member Ted Deutsch after learning the story of Majd. In 2017, as I noted a few minutes ago, he was traveling to Syria, and we haven't seen him since. Now, today, alongside Congresswoman Haley Stevens, Democrat of Michigan, our hostage task force in the House has continued to help families. Together, we've made great strides, including making March 9th National Hostage and Wrongful Detainee Day. It's a law, and I was proud to work with Haley to see that legislation enacted so that our families now have some financial support if they live outside the Washington, D.C., coming to advocate on behalf of their loved one. Every channel of the U.S. government should be working to bring these Americans home and disincentivize the wrongful detention of Americans in the future by state actors or non-state actors. This means that Congress must play an important role in conjunction with the executive branch. The Levinson Act was an excellent start in the right direction back in 2020, codifying the work of both President Obama and President Trump. However, more should be done. First, no country or non-state actor should be able to take an American with impunity, period, full stop. These instances must be punished, and this should be a focal point of U.S. foreign policy. It should be at the top of every bilateral diplomatic meeting or negotiation with the countries at hand that Americans be released before we start that conversation. And finally, transparency and communication with the families must continue to improve. That's what I'm committed to, that's what Congress is committed to, and that's why I appreciate Chairman McCall and Chairman Mast putting together this outstanding roundtable. I yield back.
Chairman McCall, we're going to lead now to Representative Jason Crow.
Thank you, Chairman Mast and Chairman McCall for your leadership on these issues as well as our colleague French Hill for your incredible advocacy and leadership, and Haley Stevens as well for the hostages and the wrongfully detained. I'll be short because no amount of words or empathy from us will replace the absence of your loved ones and your family here today. The purpose of this is to listen, to learn with all of you. We're here because we are committed to this. We are committed to doing everything possible in a bipartisan way to bring to bear a whole of government approach to bring your loved ones home. That is the bottom line. That is what we are here to do. And with that, I will yield back, and I will say I look forward to your comments and learning from you and seeing what more we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. Chairman McCall has been actively involved in this. Again, he's not Johnny-come-lately to this. He's been doing this throughout the breadth of all of his time in Congress. I'm proud to have him as a colleague. And Chairman, the mic is yours.
And thank you, Chairman Mast, and I want to thank you for your leadership. And Ranking Member Crow, French, your leadership on this has been extraordinary. I can't think of anything more painful than to have my loved one abducted and held hostage in a foreign land. My wife and I want to think of all of you very often. I've visited with all of you previously. In fact, I was with you, sir, at the White House Congressional Correspondents' Dinner. I know your wife was abducted and is in Iran, and all of you, to Austin Tice and Anna. It's just, so I also want to note, acknowledge the ones who cannot be here, those who are illegally held overseas, but also certain families who are not able to join us. I think one hostage is too many. And we're seeing a trend now where it is becoming a practice of foreign governments to take hostages in exchange for a trade. We have Americans wrongfully detained in Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan. We remember all of them. I always put it high at the list. As French said, this should be the first thing spoken when the Secretary of State visits a country that has detained an American unlawfully. And I do give the administration some credit, but I also want to raise issues. For instance, we traded Victor Bout, one of the world's most notorious arms dealers, called the Merchant of Death, for Brittany Griner, a basketball player who had a vape pipe. If we're going to do trades, I think the trade should be a fair trade, not a lopsided trade, because that only encourages more hostage taking. Another miscalculation, in my judgment, was trading 5 Iranian spies and giving Iran access to $6 billion for the exchange of 5 innocent Americans. Think about that, Iranian spies for innocent Americans. And sir, your wife was left behind in that trade. This is just encouraging more ransom, hostage taking. After we gave Iran access to the $6 billion, we saw Hamas take 241 hostages from Israel, including many Americans, and we know that many of them have not survived in the tunnels in Gaza. We should be projecting power, as Reagan talked about. We should be levying sanctions, punishing bad behavior, not rewarding bad behavior. I have 5 kids, and if there are no consequences to bad behavior, guess what? Bad behavior continues, and it just encourages more of that. We need to hold them accountable for their human rights abuses and negotiate from a position of strength, not weakness. Today is all about you. It's all about the missing Americans. I grieve for you. I think about you every day. I think about not only you, but your families. You know, as I saw Anna at the State of the Union with her dear children, I can't imagine high school kids having to deal with the fact that their father is held by the Taliban in Afghanistan, not knowing what is happening, what kind of health condition he is in, and never knowing for sure if he'll ever come home. But in each of your cases, we are following up with the appropriate countries and the ambassadors to get them returned safely back home. And I think of Austin, who's been held probably the longest in a Syrian prison. To all of you, I can't imagine the grief. Quite frankly, it makes me angry. And we need to do something about it and get them home now. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman. Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you, Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Crow. My heart breaks for each and every one of you. To me, this is not about politics at all. This is about getting your family members home. I think every American, whether you're the President of the United States, a member of Congress, or a person that's just working, sanitation, police, just working on the streets, do not want your loved ones held, detained, held hostage in any country. We want them home. You want them home. And it's important that we have a whole of government approach. We shouldn't be playing, and I won't play politics with this one. This is not about Democrat, Republican politics. It's not about this, whether, this is something that I think that every president, whether it be George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, anybody that holds the office of president, I know they all want to have your loved ones home. I know they all want to make sure that no American is detained. And I know that they will do anything that is possible to bring them home. But that's not just enough. Because it's never enough until they are home. And we can never rest until they are home. It's unimaginable to me, the pain that you go through every day. Sometimes listening to what we're saying in Congress, the rhetoric that we talk about in Congress. You want your loved ones home. And we've got to be committed to do what we need to do to get them home. We know that you also are suffering economically in other ways. That's why I'm glad that we finally did pass a bill to try to help families until your loved ones get here. This is what this is about for me. It's about getting them home. It's about, when I look at the countries that many of them being held in, non-democratic governments, we want to force and see those changes. But we know that we can't rest. I know I can't rest until your family members and all those that are detained or held hostage in whatever country they may be in are home. Because the only reason that they're being held are because they're Americans. And so every American have the responsibility, the concern, and the commitment that your loved ones come back to you. You could be any place. Your bravery of being here today is just unimaginable to me. The pain that you say you have. So I'm here just to listen to you. Listen to you and be with you till we can get your loved ones home. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks. We're going to now recognize each one of you to speak and share with us what you wish about being family of an American detained abroad. We will be recognizing you first, Ms. Corbett. While we're waiting for you to be recognized for one moment, I would ask Mr. Beckett if you wouldn't mind joining us as well, as you're representing the Gershkovich family as well as a member of the Wall Street Journal. Some of the members may have questions for you as well. Ms. Corbett, your
point of inquiry, please.
Yes, Mr. Green.
Will other members have an opportunity to say a word?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Corbett, you're recognized.
Thank you. My husband, Ryan Corbett, was a healthy and selfless 39-year-old man who for more than a decade committed himself and our family to helping the Afghan people build the local economy and gain financial stability to achieve a better life for themselves and their families. In August 2022, having relocated to the U.S. with our family, Ryan returned to Afghanistan to check on his business, a business he had specifically been encouraged by the Taliban to continue. He was granted a visa for this purpose, and now for 628 days, he's been held hostage in a basement cell by the Taliban intelligence services. He's endured unspeakably brutal treatment. If Ryan makes it out of Afghanistan alive, our 3 children and I worry that he will be unrecognizable to us and unable to ever fully recover. I'm grateful for the assistance of the many public servants who have worked to bring Ryan home. But I must say that this experience has tested my faith in our government's ability to solve the toughest problems. For example, the State Department took 14 months to designate Ryan as wrongfully detained based on a minor policy decision that should have been resolved in hours or days, not months. Similarly, it took 8 months for me to be granted my first meeting with representatives of the National Security Council. Now, although I'm able to get meetings, little to no information is shared with me. In the past several months, the information coming out of the White House has slowed to a trickle. My pleas for help are simply ignored by the NSC officials responsible for Ryan's case. I desperately want to have faith in these efforts, but as I sit here today, I literally have no idea what steps are being taken to rescue my husband. Notably, when I'm here in person or in the media, there seems to be a direct correlation to my speaking publicly and policymaker attention. It seems to move efforts a little. This is my 11th trip to the Capitol, and I'm exhausted. I'm caring for 3 children who are still processing the trauma of having been without Ryan when we need him the most. They've only spoken to him 5 times in over 20 months for mere minutes. I will continue to fight every day, but I often feel helpless and alone. There is, however, room for hope. The response and support for Ryan in Congress has been amazing. I'm grateful for my New York Senators Schumer and Gillibrand, who immediately assessed the gravity of our situation and have been champions on behalf of our family from day one. Senator McConnell has also been extremely supportive and committed himself to this cause. House of Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman McCall has also been a huge advocate for Ryan and generously allowed me to share Ryan's story for the first time at a public hearing. And last but not least, I'm also very grateful for my representative, Claudia Tenney, who's also been by our side from the beginning. Support has been growing on the Hill and culminated in a House resolution with 72 bipartisan co-sponsors and a Senate resolution, which was passed by both leaders of the Senate in time for Ryan's 41st birthday 3 weeks ago. The Taliban very much want to be part of the world community, and they want many policy benefits from the United States in particular. And the U.S. seems to be willing to engage and explore areas in which it sees opportunities for progress. There are many public statements from U.S. diplomats involved in these efforts. Most recently, we've seen public statements about women's rights, education. We even saw pronouncements regarding environmental consciousness on Earth Day. Specifically, and I quote, "Afghanistan is at the forefront of the battle against climate change." These words matter. Notably and remarkably absent from this public dialogue is any mention of Ryan and other American citizens who are held hostage. Over $2 billion of aid money has been sent to Afghanistan since Ryan has been held. We should be universally shocked and appalled that the Taliban is not feeling an ounce of pain for holding a U.S. citizen hostage and not allowing him to be visited by doctors or even to speak on a regular basis with his family. In response to formal complaints we made to the UN last week, the Taliban told the U.S. media that Ryan has access to doctors and regular telephone conversations with us. These are things we know are blatantly untrue, but to date, the State Department has not corrected the record. As I finish, in the absence of any information from the administration and considering these public policy pronouncements, how can I reach any conclusion other than this? Saving Ryan's life is not a priority. Thank you so much for letting me share my experience, and thank you for your interest in Ryan's case. I hope it helps in some small way the families who are forced to confront the horrors of hostage diplomacy. We can and we must do better for our loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett. Ms. Debra Tice.
Thank you so much for doing that, and thank you so much for thank you for being. Luddite.
That's better.
So I'm Debra Tice, mother of Austin Tice, held in silence 4,278 days, which is 11 years, 8 months, and 1 week. Before I share my thoughts, I would like to answer the awkward question. Is he still alive? Yes, Austin is alive, and no doubt, eager to walk free. This is not wishful mom talk, but it would not be prudent for me to share the source. As ever, and even more than ever, in order to be a robust country in an ever-shrinking world, the United States government needs to be free to engage foreign governments diplomatically, economically, and intellectually in order to advance the interests of the United States. This brings me to the issue of H.R. 3202, which weighs heavily on my heart. It would be profoundly detrimental to the functions of our government for it to be illegal to engage with another country, to prohibit all commerce with another country, to attempt to mandate the foreign policies of our allies. How can disagreements be peacefully resolved if all engagement is forbidden? If the United States government is prohibited and prohibits any business or ally from engaging with the standing current Syrian Arab Republic government and its serving president, Bashar al-Assad, the United States of America is effectively condemning Austin and any other Americans detained in Syria to life in prison. If our legislative branch insists on codifying this onerous burden, I must plead that an amendment be attached which allows engagement for the benefit of freeing unjustly detained hostage Americans. My preference, and the more noble stance for my country, is to diplomatically engage with all countries in an effort toward an end of strife and the beginning of healing, to lead in peacemaking rather than warmongering. I am asking our House and Senate to encourage our President, the executive branch, including the State Department, to effectively engage with the Syrian government in order to secure the release of Austin, Majd, and any other American detainees. The President and every capable entity should always be encouraged to peacefully engage with any entity holding Americans unjustly. We should not allow Americans to be held hostage. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Kamalmaz.
Hi, I'm the daughter of Majd Kamalmaz. Majd Kamalmaz is an American Syrian, born in Syria, raised in the United States. All of his children were born in the United States. First, I'd like to thank you for taking this time to listen to us and listen to our father's horrific situation that he's been going through for the past 7 years. And thank you to Representative French Hill for always being there for my father and continuing your advocacy to bring him home. My father is an award-winning psychotherapist. He had a heart to care for people. His passion was to help, and he found it through mental health. He traveled the world to help those that had suffered the most extreme forms of trauma. And the latest was the situation in Syria. He had set up an institute named the International Institute for Psychosocial Development in Lebanon, where his doors were open to everyone. And I'd want to make that clear. He was not political. His door was open to anyone that walked through that needed any sort of help. He was there to help, and his techniques awarded him the Humanitarian of the Year award by the HeartMath Institute here in the United States. He was very successful at what he did. Throughout time, he was recommended to come into Syria to see the situation of those that needed his help there as well as to check on family members that were suffering from cancer and were going to pass away. He went in from Lebanon into Damascus legally without any issues. He slept the night at a family member's house. The next morning, he was out on his very first trip into the city when he was stopped at a checkpoint and wrongfully detained. Till today, we don't know why or what happened. All we know is that he did have his American passport on him and that they did see him as a very big, important person. And they believed that he would be a person worth negotiating with the United States for, and which we were told at that time that they did try to negotiate with the United States to do a trade, and the United States turned it down. It's been 7 years now. My father has not been charged with a crime. There has been no case. There's been no trial. Nothing. No word from him. How can you be taken at a checkpoint that belongs to the government and not be heard from again? If there was anything against him, by now we would have surely known. If there was anything against him by now, the Syrian government would have actually said, we do have him and here he is and he's alive and well. There's nothing. And the US government has not been successful at having the Syrian government come forward with any form of information. Can you imagine for us as a family, not knowing anything about your loved one for 7 years? If anything did happen to my father, then I know it would be a form of torture, a form of execution, possibly murder. How can a government take an innocent person, not give him a trial, no case, no crime, and then disappear him? And I'm supposed to be okay with that without any form of proof. That's not possible, and it won't happen. I need to know whether my father is alive or not. I have to know whether my father is alive or not. My entire family needs to know. My grandmother needs to know. We need proof. And it's not okay to just say, well, he's originally Syrian, so it is what it is. He's an American. We're all American. We need to know where he is and how he is and if he's alive or not. And we want him home regardless of his situation. I'd also request that we put pressure on the Syrians to admit whether if they have him or how his situation is. It's about time that we do need to come to a conclusion, and it's 7 years of not knowing is way too long, and we need to come to a conclusion of the circumstances and the situation that he's in. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Sharmahd.
Dear members of Congress, fellow family members, and ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gazelle Sharmahd. I'm the daughter of Jamshid Sharmahd, or Jimmy as we call him. Jimmy is a German-American national currently held hostage in Iran on death row. My father did not travel to Iran. He did not just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. My dad was kidnapped and taken to Iran by force. My father is a journalist who used his First Amendment right to advocate for freedom, democracy, and our God-given rights. And he knew if we as Americans fail to oppose human rights violations abroad, like in Iran, these terrorist regimes and their repression will find its way on our soil. And he was right. This is not my family's first encounter with the regime's transnational terrorism. They have harassed us for decades here on US soil. In 2009, the regime sent their assassins to our home in Los Angeles to murder us. Luckily, that was foiled, but that was the first of many attempts to silence Jimmy by force. In 2020, the regime agents kidnapped my father during a flight overlay and took him to Iran. And I don't expect anything but cruelty and violence from terrorists, but our family has been disappointed by our State Department officials, particularly the former Iran envoy Robert Malley, whose tenure has failed to address my father's critical situation for 3 years. When the Islamic regime showcased the international kidnapping of an American by parading my father on their national TV, blindfolded with a swollen face, forced to confessions, there was zero response from the US. When they tortured him on a daily basis, broke his teeth, withdrew his life-saving Parkinson's medication until my dad could barely walk, talk, or breathe, and then sentenced him to death in what Amnesty International and other organizations call a sham trial, there was zero response from the US. When Mr. Malley and his colleagues negotiated the release of several Americans last summer, and without explanation, excluded my father and others, and our family were asking why in hell would we leave the one American hostage in Iran on death row, defenselessly in the hands of his kidnappers and tormentors, there was zero response. And when last month, on March 11th, the regime sentenced my dad once again, but this time together with 52 US officials and presidents, to pay $2.5 billion, within a 60-day ultimatum, or else they will hang my dad in public from a crane, there was zero response. This oversight represents not just diplomatic failure, but a betrayal of American values. And you may ask yourself right now, how come I have not been informed and have not heard about an American national harassed, kidnapped, tortured, abandoned, and condemned to death? Well, I'm asking myself the same question because I've been very vocal from day one. And that's why I want to thank the members of this committee and everyone who made this briefing possible today. We last heard from my dad in October, and he could barely make out the words that he was saying because he had stabbing chest pains and difficulty breathing. And as a critical care nurse, my first thing that I was thinking was I have to immediately call 911. But I can't do that. I can only call on you. When we show zero response to a state actor violating all international laws and human rights through abduction and wrongful detention, the consequences do not just affect my father and my family, but everyone here and beyond. It challenges the very principles of justice, human dignity, and the rule of law, and the United States must uphold them. Please do everything in your power to right this wrong and bring my dad back home and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Prior to me calling on Mr. Butorin in a moment, Ms. Ida Dogher, would you mind sitting next to Ms. Corbett there in case members have questions for you as well? Sister-in-law of Zach Shaheen, who's detained in Dubai. Mr. Butorin, you are recognized.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you, and I'd like to thank Chairman McCall personally for his steadfast support as we fight to secure Alsu's release from Russian captivity. And back in October, when Alsu was brutally detained by authorities in Russia, Chairman McCall was first to issue a strong statement in her support. And I appreciate your statement yesterday calling on the State Department to designate Alsu as wrongfully detained. Since October 18th last year, Alsu has been held prisoner in inhumane conditions. In fact, we heard her describe these conditions recently in court. She eats and sleeps 3 feet from a hole in the floor for a toilet. Her health is deteriorating. She is not receiving adequate medical care. She has not been allowed a single phone call with her daughters. This weekend will mark 200 days of Alsu's unjust detention in Russia. For more than half a year now, my wife and the mother of our 2 young daughters has been jailed in Russia on charges that make no sense to her or to us. She is accused of being a foreign agent, the only person currently incarcerated in Russia on these charges, and also of spreading what Russia believes to be false information about its army in Ukraine. 6 months on, my children and I are struggling to understand why Alsu was captured and what the Russian government wants from our family. It's been a very tough several months for us. I have 2 daughters who, at a very tender age, they're 12 and 15, have been without their mother for almost a year now. I'm doing the best I can as a single father, but there's that bond between a mother and her daughters, and that's something that I can't substitute for. The words "we miss Alsu" don't adequately describe the daily pain that we go through. Alsu has spent her career at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. It's a congressionally funded, editorially independent news organization, and she is now targeted for her work at RFERL and for exercising her First Amendment rights as an American. Alsu wasn't born American. She chose to become an American citizen because of the great American promise of personal freedom, free speech and expression, freedom to exercise religion or exercise none. Becoming an American is a solemn and emotional event. I remember Alsu being overwhelmed with emotion, with tears in her eyes, as she pronounced her oath of allegiance to the United States and renounced all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign state. My elder daughter is turning 16 this summer. She's 2 years from becoming a voter in U.S. elections. Alsu can hardly count on Russia's court system for justice, but we want to be sure that we can count on the U.S. government for support in our effort to free Alsu. The State Department should not hesitate to declare her as wrongfully detained and commit to securing her speedy release from Russian captivity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members are now going to ask questions. For those that they have questions for, we're going to begin by recognizing Chairman McCall for as long as he wishes.
You, Chairman Mast. Let me just say that it was very powerful, all five of you. Let me also correct, I misspoke. I meant Jimmy was left behind in the negotiations. 5 Iranian spies for 5 innocent Americans, and then your husband left behind, and $6 billion. All of your cases are devastating emotionally, and Pavel, I know we talked about your wife, Radio Free Europe, just speaking the truth, being under now confined in a Russian prison, in Syria and Taliban under the worst conditions. I guess my question would be, you know, this is being carried live by C-SPAN. It is being watched not only in this country, but it's being watched around the world right now. And it's being watched by our adversaries, like the Taliban, like Assad, like the Ayatollah, like Putin. And my question for all 5 of you is, what message would you like to deliver to those who are holding your loved ones hostage? And what message would you like to send to the administration? So we maybe start with you, Anna.
I would say to the Taliban, just let Ryan go. Let him come home before it's too late, before he deteriorates, dies. Our family needs him. He was only trying to help. He had a valid visa. He had run his business, helping the Afghan people. So many people expressed gratitude to him, and he was trying to help. And yeah, they need to do the right thing and let him go before it's too late. That's what I would say to the Taliban. We are praying as a family, as a community around the world for his safety, for his return, and we need him back. Also, I would say to the administration that Ryan's case needs to truly be prioritized. I've heard over and over that it is a priority to bring U.S. citizens home. Ryan's a U.S. citizen, and I want to see this case truly prioritized. Decisions need to be made, steps need to be taken, and we want communication. As a family, we deserve that. We need to hear what is going on. My 3 teenage kids are very much aware of what is happening and very concerned for their dad. We also have such strong support between the resolution and on the Senate side and the House side. I just don't understand how this would not be prioritized. Everyone's agreeing. It's one thing that everyone's agreeing on. Ryan needs to be brought home immediately. So why are we not doing this? That's what I would say to the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Ms. Tice.
Addressing Syria first, I would say, I think you're aware that I have been advocating and pushing and demanding and crying. Addressing the Syrian government, I would tell them that I believe they know that I have been advocating for Austin's release, and that I have been pushing our government ever since they sent me the message on March 3rd, 2014. They were not meet with the mother, send me a United States government official of appropriate title to discuss transfer possession of Austin Tice. And since that day, I have been begging my government, Obama, Trump, and now Biden, to engage genuinely, sincerely, to secure Austin's release. I would like for you to note that Austin has now served more than 2 of the punishments of entering your country illegally, and as a mother, I beg you to recognize how hard I've worked to make this happen, and I would hope that you could offer mercy and allow us to have Austin walk free. To my government, I would say that pretty words don't substitute for hard work. I know that this is something many people are opposed to, but Austin's freedom relies on engagement with the Syrian government, sincere engagement with the Syrian government. And in the absence of that, my understanding is that he will stay in a Syrian prison.
Thank you, Ms. Tice. Ms. Kamalmaz.
My message to the Syrian government would also be that this is a human being and he means a lot to us. And he's a father, he's a son, he's a grandfather to 14 grandchildren. We need to know what has happened to him. Do the right thing. If you want to be recognized as a government, then you need to also acknowledge what all of the detainees, what has happened to them. They can't just disappear people and expect the world to forget. We need to know what happened to my father. We need closure. So come forward. Please let us know what his condition is, how he is, and if he's alive or not. And to the United States government, I would say, as Ms. Tice said, there's a lot of pretty words. Unfortunately, there's not as much action. We need serious action. We've both been waiting in the dark to learn about our loved ones, and how long is it expected of us to keep waiting and for things to drag on for months and months and months. That's not okay. We expect that you do all that you can, just as we've seen you do with so many other families in other situations, that you would take our cases as serious, if not more serious, since we do not know the condition of our loved ones, and do your best to bring them home, to bring us news about them, to be able to have closure. I think we deserve closure.
You certainly do. Ms. Sharmahd.
First, to the Islamic regime in Iran, I have nothing to say. They're not a legitimate government. This is a terrorist organization that is holding the entire nation of Iran hostage for 45 years. And if I ever gonna talk to them, the kidnappers and hostage takers of my father, it will be in an international court where they will be held accountable for what they've done to my father and their crimes against humanity. To my government and America, my president, my members of Congress, the State Department, we're 4 generations of Americans now living here. We have rights. We have the Levinson Law. We have been ignored for 3 years and longer. It took me to leave my little 3-year-old daughter at home and come to DC last summer in a sit-in strike with other families in front of the State Department until they finally, after 3 years, talked to us. Just talked to us. I would give anything for nice words. I haven't heard nice words. The only time they have talked about my father, who's obviously kidnapped and taken there, was when they said he's also a German citizen and Germany will take care of it. This responsibility ping pong between America and Germany is costing my dad his life right now. And that is not okay. We have to step up as a nation. We have to protect our citizens. And when I mean protect our citizens, I mean also us. I am not safe in my house. I am not safe, and I have to, thankfully to the FBI field office in California, I am safe when I'm traveling here in America. I cannot travel to Germany without 24-hour protection. What does that mean? It means our failure to respond when my father was almost assassinated and then kidnapped is causing us this distress. This is showing the terrorists, you can come and kidnap people and do that to them, and nothing will happen to you. So I'm asking you to help me raise this case and bring my father home, and we need investigations to see what was going on last year, why he was left behind. This should not be happening. Thank you.
Very powerful. Mr. Kurmasheva.
To the Russian government, I want to say that Alsu presents no threat to you. She's not an activist. She's not a member of the Russian opposition. She is an American journalist. She is an innocent mother of 2 young daughters who miss her very much. Please let her go. To my government here in the United States, the designation of Alsu as wrongfully detained has been long overdue. I understand that the designation alone will not bring her home immediately, but this will send a powerful signal to the Russian government and also to Alsu's fellow journalists. I refuse to think of Alsu and of Evan as pawns in a political game. They're human beings. They should be treated as human beings, both by the Russians and by the U.S. government. Now that President Biden has called at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on the Russian leader to release Evan and Alsu immediately, I think the State Department should follow suit and commit to Alsu's release as well. My question is simple. Does the U.S. government believe that Alsu's detention by the Russian government is justified or wrongful? Is there a suggestion that Alsu has indeed broken Russian law and her detention is therefore justified? Does it mean that we here endorse Russia's repressive media laws directed against Americans? I hope to think that the answer is no. I would like the government to commit to Alsu and Evan's release, and let me just also say that I stand in solidarity with all the other families and all other detainees represented here today.
Yeah, I know we'll follow up, but I just want to, in closing, Mr. Chairman, mention Mark Swidan, who's represented by his congressman from Texas, Houston area, and wrongfully detained in China for bogus charges. Now he's on death row in China for a crime he didn't commit. And I think about his family as well, and thank you for being here, sir. Yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope my colleagues will accept my apology. We have two members here who are here to offer statements on behalf of families that couldn't attend. I didn't realize they were here to offer statements. I thought they were here to question. So we're going to recognize those two members to offer their statements. First of all, Representative Rich McCormick, representing the Gambaryan family.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for arranging this roundtable. Really appreciate it. Firstly, my thoughts and prayers are with Tigran, Gambaryan, and his wife, Yuki, his two children, and the entire family for the pain and suffering they have endured throughout this time of Tigran's unjust detention. Tigran belongs at home in the arms of his loved ones, and I believe that our duty is to dedicate every possible resource to ensure his safe and expedient return home to the United States. Unfortunately, Mrs. Gambaryan has been unable to attend us today at this roundtable, so I'm delivering the following statement on her behalf. Thank you, Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Crow, and the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee for hosting this very important roundtable discussion. Although I am unable to attend in person today, I am thankful for the chance to share my story. By doing so, I hope we can progress toward correcting a grave injustice. I want to start by acknowledging the strength and courage of the other families here today, whether in person or otherwise. We are members of an exclusive and unwanted club, the loved ones of those held hostage abroad. As wives, daughters, husbands, sons, fathers, and mothers, we yearn for the day we can be reunited with our loved ones and restore the wholeness that was taken from us. I understand your plight and will think of you and your loved ones every day, hoping and praying for their swift return. My husband and the father of our two young children, Tigran, has been in Nigerian custody for 65 days, the longest 2 months of our lives. On February 25th, he landed in Abuja at the Nigerian government's request for financial compliance policy meetings with government officials. This is what Tigran does. He helps countries to navigate the notoriously prickly world of finance crimes compliance. He spends his days investigating and pursuing criminal activity on the cryptocurrency platform of Binance, his employer. However, 24 hours after his arrival, he was arrested and detained without charge or explanation. It took over 2 weeks for the Nigerian government to fabricate tax-related charges against Tigran and Binance. I cannot speak for his employer, but the charges against Tigran are utterly baseless. He was lured into the country under false pretenses, only to be arrested due to some vendetta against his employer. And now my whole family is being caught in the crossfire. Today, my husband sits in the notorious Cluj prison, a place that has held militants from Islamic State and Boko Haram. Ironically, Tigran spent more than a decade as a special agent for the United States Internal Revenue Service, investigating issues of national security, terrorist financing, identity theft, distribution of child pornography, tax evasion, and more. He is deeply committed to doing the right thing and has dedicated his life to doing so. To see my husband, who is by nature a person of goodwill and strong moral character, be used as a bargaining chip by the Nigerian government is devastating. The United States cannot afford to remain passive while its once citizen suffers tremendously in the name of geopolitical gamesmanship. Tigran has served his country with distinction. I am asking you now to repay this service. I have exhausted nearly every avenue, contacting representatives, the Department of State, and even the Nigerian government. I have called for more people in the last 2 months than I have in my entire life. I am trying my best to push the right buttons and pull the right levers so that we can correct this injustice my husband is going through. I hope this plea will be a catalyst for action. For over 2 decades, we have learned to live as a family of 3. This is by far the longest my children have ever gone without seeing their father. They ask me daily when he will be home, and every day I summon all my strength to give them a hopeful answer. I sincerely hope that this statement will not be updated in the future, because that would mean that our efforts to bring my beloved husband home have not been successful. Thank you for your time and for your dedication to resolving this nightmare. Signed, Yuki Gambaryan. And I'd like to say, as the representative of the entire Gambaryan family, I'm proud to sit on this panel and offer her statement. Listening to the other testimonies this morning has been incredibly moving. Once again, thank you to the committee for holding this important roundtable. I hope that Tigran and all those who are unjustly held as Americans are returned home safely in an expedient manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCormick. Representative Cloud, on behalf of the Swidan family.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee leaders and members, for bringing much-needed attention to this issue. I know you've been working on this for quite some time, and thank you all for being here to share your heart-wrenching story, and please know that our prayers are with you as well. I will read the testimony from Catherine Swidan, mother of Mark Swidan, who is unjustly detained in Communist China and has been so for about a decade. These are her words, unedited. Chairperson, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for affording me a chance to share my son Mark's story with you. My name is Catherine Swidan from Luling, Texas, and I'm the mother of Mark Swidan, an American citizen who's been unjustly detained in China for 11 years. Mark is not a statistic. He's a son, a brother, and a friend whose absence has left a gaping hole in our hearts and family. He went to China to visit and do business, and he will leave, I hope soon, as a former political prisoner. I wish I could be there today, but my health is failing, and I need to be strong for when Mark comes home. Over a decade has passed since Mark was taken from us, and every day without him is a day too long. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his innocence and the arbitrary nature of his detention, Mark continues to languish in a foreign prison, deprived of his freedoms, his health deteriorating, and his hope fading. I don't want my son to become an Otto Warmbier or James Foley. I understand that diplomacy is complex and that negotiations with foreign governments are delicate, yet we know that the Chinese government has expressed willingness to resolve my son's case, presenting proposals that regrettably have been met with reluctance or outright rejection by the Biden administration. Time is something Mark and our family do not have the luxury of. Every moment lost is a moment Mark has denied justice, a moment our family cannot regain. I'm here today not only as a grieving but determined mother, but as a representative of every American family whose loved ones are wrongfully detained abroad to plead for your help. There are so many of us, but we all hear in the news is recent cases of celebrity cases. Who speaks for us? I ask you all to demand that the Biden administration reconsider its stance to engage earnestly with the Chinese government on Mark and all Americans. Our loved ones are not bargaining chips or political pawns. They are human beings whose rights and freedoms deserve to be upheld and protected. I read a lot about Congress standing up for the human rights of Chinese political prisoners, yet very little, if anything, about Mark or other Americans. As leaders of this great nation, I implore you not to let diplomatic complexities stand in the way of human decency and justice. I'm pleading for my son's life, for his freedom, and for the chance to bring him home. Let us show the world that the United States of America does not abandon its citizens and that we fight for their rights and their return, no matter the challenges. A few weeks ago, Bishop Strickland from Texas visited with me. We talked and prayed for Mark, a devout Catholic who, even in captivity, has stood up for fellow prisoners when abused by the Chinese guards. Mark has had his Bible confiscated and rosary destroyed, but as I shared with Bishop Strickland, he has not lost his faith in God, family, or country. I also want to thank Mel Gibson, who did a video for Mark and a Mast, and so many members of Congress from Texas, such as Representative Clout and Senator Ted Cruz, for not forgetting Mark and his plight. There's so many other people supporting Mark. I hope Mark can meet them all someday so that he learns he's not alone and not forgotten. In closing, I ask for your immediate action and your commitment to engage in a meaningful dialogue and negotiations for Mark's release. Our family is counting on you, as is Mark. Please help bring my son home. This case has already set a terrible precedent for hostage diplomacy, but my son is still alive and can end on a high note. This must never happen again to any American. Thank you for supporting the congressional resolution on Mark last year and for your time and consideration. And that ends her statement. I do want to thank this committee for working on that resolution and for all members of Congress for unanimously supporting HRES 90 last April. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Cloud. I just want to let members know we will be expecting our first vote series in about 25 minutes. Ranking Member Ranking Member Meeks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to thank all of you for your testimony. And I know you may not think that it's enough, but by you being here and speaking and others hearing and this being, it is something that is getting out to the rest of the world and all of Americans. I see a scenario also where we've had individuals that have been held hostage or wrongfully detained for years and years, like Ms. Tice, I believe, since 2012. Oh. Can you hear me now? All right. So I said, I see that there's a difference. The pain is the same. In your case, Austin has been held since 2012. Some have been held just for a matter of months, just recently. All of these authoritarian governments are doing the same thing over and over again, year after year. We can go back, I don't care how long. I know that I've been in Congress for 26 years. 26 years. And it's happened my entire congressional career. People held, and have families like you. One that I know is held, his wife is still in Nigeria, can't get out. I know that I've talked to members on both sides. I know Haley Stevens and Mr. Green, for example. Me, when I was the chair of this committee and the ranking member, they constantly coming to me, advocating on behalf of those loved ones that are your loved ones. So my question to you is, and it hurts me, because I'm part of the United States government. It's not just the executive branch, it's not just the judicial, I'm part of it, all of us in Congress. And I've heard you talk about coming to talk to Congress, and we've given you and give you the opportunity to let other Americans hear your stories. But I want to know, what can I do? What can Congress do? What's your relationship? What do you think that Congress can do? We're not powerless here. I know that, every opportunity that I have when I speak to anybody from any of these countries, if I get the chance, I understand you're concerned, Ms. Tice, about talking to others, because that is what diplomacy is about. And if you don't talk to others, especially those that you don't agree with, it's hard to get a resolution. And we need to try to get that done, because those are the individuals. There are none of them that are holding any American. We don't like any of them.
Those are the ones we need to talk to.
I agree with you. And that is true when I talk about from administration to administration. For 26 years. Doesn't matter. You do matter. Your loved ones that are being held do matter. So, in your experiences in talking to members of Congress, I just want to know, what more can we do? I don't want to push it off on anybody else. I'm on this Foreign Affairs Committee for a long time. What more can we do? What your reactions with Congress and talking to us, what do you think we need to improve? I'll start. We can go down. I'll start with you, Ms. Corbett, and we can go down. Just tell me, what can we do?
Thank you. I first want to say that in my personal experience, I have received incredible support from all of you and many others on the Hill. It's been truly a bright spot in this nightmare, and I am extremely grateful. I would say the outreaches to the State Department and the White House asking for briefings has been very helpful, and all of those show that our case is a priority and important and matters. So that's something that I would say I've had a good experience with, but more of that. And I think for all the cases, I don't know, each situation I know is so different, but that's what I would say makes a difference. And a coordination of that, a bipartisan coordination, letters asking for these cases to be prioritized, asking those hard questions. Where are things at? Where are things stuck right now? If they're stuck, what is the issue? What needs to, how can the next step be taken? Is what comes to my mind.
My Congressman Green, has been holding my hand for over 11 years, and I would like for him to answer this question on behalf of our family.
The chair yield to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, please let me thank all of you for the efforts that you've made. It means a lot to this family, and I believe to all of the families. So if I may thank you. I think Ms. Tice makes an excellent point, and Chairman Meeks, I thank you for following up on it with reference to having dialogue. I can think of but one reason why we shouldn't talk to those who hold persons hostage, but one, and that is if the families choose not to have us do so. Other than that, I can think of no reason. If the families don't want us to talk, then we don't talk. But if these families want us to talk and advocate, I think we ought to do it. I don't think we should leave any stone unturned. I don't think there's a bridge too far. I don't think there's a price too high. Every one of them, regardless as to what they do, by the way, makes no difference to me. They're human beings being held hostage, and they need to be brought home. Ms. Tice, I also want to thank you for the courage you have shown over the years. This has not been an easy journey for you. You've been to Syria. You went to Syria yourself. You tried to speak to Assad yourself. I don't know what the solution is, but I know what it isn't. And it is not isolating ourselves from the people who are holding our people hostage. And I would say that to any president. And it's not to cast any shade, as we say it in the hood, on anybody. It's just that this is very painful. So I thank you, Ms. Tice, for the courage you have shown. I don't know whether I responded appropriately, but that was what was on my heart, and I had to say it. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Right, thank you for having us ask you something that you could help us with. As you know, we're here for this reason. For us as a family, we'd really want to know our father's fate as of right now. We need proof of life or proof of death, as well as we need to continue the direct communication with the Syrians to find out exactly what happened. And without direct communication, we won't be able to get anywhere. We'll stay in this loop forever. And that's not going to happen. That's not possible. So there absolutely needs to be a form of negotiations, of direct communication, of clarity between the United States government and the Syrians about the fate of our loved ones. I recommend that this needs to be addressed and pushed forward on in order for any sort of information to come back to us and help our families cope with what's going on. And as well as if anything has happened to my father, we do want him back home regardless. So that's my ask, to continue pushing. If there's any information the U.S. government is holding back from us, we need to know, and as well as direct communication with the Syrians to find out exactly what's happened and to bring them home.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you one more time for having this hearing. Hearings like that are so important to me, my family, my father, who's been ignored by the media, ignored by our administration. So just being here means the world to us, because the regime can see that we're not forgetting about people that have been kidnapped. I want to thank also my lawyer, Jason Poblet, and I encourage you to work together with these lawyers that have done wonderful things from day one, make it possible for us to come here and be here and take part in these things. What I wish from my people in Congress is, first of all, congressional oversight about what is going on, how we're dealing with hostage cases, who is making decisions, on what grounds, how do we cherry pick hostages, and that should not happen. We should not have a celebrity like Brittany Griner being brought out while Paul Whelan is left behind. We should not be celebrities to get equal rights over here. Also, what every member of Congress can do is what my Congresswoman Norma Torres has done: speak on the House floor and speak about and bring up the names, Jamshid Sharma, everybody's names up there, because when we get ignored, but when you are out there and ask the same questions and bring up, they cannot ignore you, and they have to answer those questions that we are bringing up, and that helps us a lot. Resolutions help a lot. Bipartisan working, letters, doing something, because it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, this affects all of us. Hostage taking affects all of us. What I also would like to see, and that is maybe above and beyond, we have hostages in Iran right now from Europe, from Australia, from Canada. We have hostages in Gaza from all over the world. So this seems to be a global problem. And if it is a global problem, why are we not working together with our allies to use everybody's leverage to put pressure on these regimes and not pressure on the families and us to release those hostages and find a solution to stop this hostage diplomacy? Thank you.
I am caught in a situation where the Russian government provides no information about Alsu, and obviously the wrongfully detained designation is very opaque to the families of those detained, so I receive also very little information from the U.S. government. So we're caught in this limbo where we don't know what's happening. The free world must have the moral fortitude to engage with bad actors. Unfortunately, that's just a fact of our lives. I'm often told that the U.S. now has little leverage with Russia. There's got to be leverage. My children are under the impression that they're citizens of the most powerful country in the world. We want to see that in action. If possible, I think we should try and facilitate contacts perhaps with third countries, third parties. There's got to be something that can be done through other parties. Someone does talk to the Russian government. And I will say it again, you know, American journalists, Evan, also, they're not pawns in a geopolitical game. They're human beings and should be treated as such. Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just such an emotional day for all of us, and we sit here with heavy hearts, whether the story is for just a few weeks or for a decade. And so we stand in solidarity with you, but I think the Gershkoviches, we were so proud to have them in the gallery for the State of the Union. Corbett's proud to have you in the State of the Union. You are not forgotten, and this group of people here today are committed to carrying that message and pressing the State Department and pressing these foreign governments. I want to start with the State Department question, and Ms. Corbett, you gave a nice sort of timeline of your relationship with states since the Taliban took Ryan. 14 months it took to designate him as wrongfully detained. Mr. Kurmasheva, you just referenced that for Anju, that she had not been so designated. So let me hear, what's the committee hear, this process of being designated wrongfully detained. How long did that take, and what was that process like? Ms. Corbett, let's start with you. You referenced it. So what was the interaction to determine, from your viewpoint, as a spouse, that, okay, he's suddenly wrongfully detained? How tell me about that.
I started working with SPIHA pretty early on in the case, but the process to actually officially designate Ryan took 14 months, as I said, and...
Did they ask you information that you had to provide them, or was it totally a State Department-driven process internally?
It was at the State Department for a really long time, and it seems like it was stuck in some legal parts of it, and they had all the information. They, yeah, it just was really stuck. I know Chairman McCall was a huge part of getting that unstuck. And so it took much too long to get that official designation. So
Tell me about your case. Reason I'm asking these questions is for the chairman, both committees, chairman and our ranking member, and for Haley Stevens and myself. How do we advocate to shorten that process, make it more clear, have some clarity in that determination process? So, sir.
I was led to believe that Alsu meets most, if not all, of the criteria. However, the State Department has been assessing a totality of circumstances around her detention. Other than that, I have very little information. I have no visibility into that process. It's quite opaque. But, you know, until she's been designated, she's being dealt with by Consular Affairs, and I do appreciate their work.
And so let's talk about that. So until one is designated, they're dealt with through the consular office connected to that country, or through our diplomatic channel if we don't have diplomatic relations, through the consular officer, is that right?
That is correct.
And then once designated, it moves to the SPIHA office?
Correct.
Anybody else have a comment on this designation issue? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we have submitted on behalf of Zach Shaheen, my brother-in-law, almost 2 years now. He's been wrongfully detained, designated this way by the United Nations Working Group. by the Foley Foundation, by Human Rights Watch, but still we're waiting for the State Department to designate him. We met 8 of the 11 criteria, and he's supposed to meet only 1 of the Levinson Act. But still, we don't know. He's not declined, he's not accepted.
Yeah.
They keep telling us, when you have new information, give us. They've got everything.
Very helpful, and this is what we wanted, and I'll let you speak, sir, and then I'll conclude and yield back. But this is precisely the kind of work we're doing on determining if the Levinson Act is functioning like we want it to. And Chairman Mast and Chairman McCall, I know this is a priority for the Foreign Affairs Committee in that assessment process. This is very helpful. Yes, sir, you wanted to comment on Evan's case.
Thank you. I'm Paul Beckett, Assistant Editor of the Wall Street Journal, working full-time to try to secure Evan's release. We appreciate our participation today, and thanks from his family, and regrets that they were unable to attend. We have the other end of that experience. To be honest, Evan was designated in 12 days after he was taken. We were grateful for that, and we feel for everyone who has not been so designated. It does make a difference. The Special Presidential Envoy's office does a very good job, has done a very good job, is doing a very good job on family liaison issues, on their efforts to find a solution that will bring Evan home. It is also apparent, which I think has been to everybody who has spoken today, that there are inevitably other parts of the United States government that are very intimately involved in this. So being referred to the Special Presidential Envoy's office is by no means the end of the process. You've heard mention of the National Security Council here. The Gershkovich family is relying on President Biden's promise, repeated promise, to bring Evan home. And obviously we'd hope that that would include everybody who's wrongfully detained, but in Russia's case, Paul Whelan and Alsu and others. So it involves many parts of the government, and I think I would sympathize with any calls for a greater transparency in how the overall process works that goes beyond the question of being wrongfully detained, because sometimes it can be hard to tell which part of the government ultimately is responsible, and in the end, it will come to the Oval Office.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Very helpful. And I thank all of you for being in, for your incredible advocacy for your families, and to work with us on your behalf to bring them home to your family. Yield back.
I'd like to say something, Representative Hill. So Austin is not wrongfully detained. And I will have to tell you that the State Department is soaked in vitriol for Syria. They want to have nothing to do with Syria. So kapow there. And as far as with Austin, where it's necessary for us to engage with Syria, it's not necessary for us to do all the things that you have to do with a hostage. Engage, dialogue, concession, every time. You're not going to get any hostages home until you do that. It doesn't matter if they're holding them on a farm somewhere in the United States. You're going to have to do those 3 things, right? So I got the message from the Syrian government when I was there in 2014 to discuss transfer possession of Austin Tice. We have Austin Tice's arrest record. We have the video of Austin 6 weeks after he was detained. But here's the off-ramp. Yay, we love those off-ramps. That we can't have a negotiation or a concession with the Syrian government unless and until they acknowledge having Austin. So I think about one of my favorite Sesame Street parts, where there's a ram and a sheep, and they're on the cliff, right? And they're on a very thin thing, and they run into each other. We're not moving. We're not moving either. And so they're just standing there, and neither one of them is getting anywhere, right? And then finally, they have this great idea. This one hops over that one, and then this one hops over that one, and away they go. And somebody somewhere has to come up with the idea that we're going to have to do the 3 steps of hostage recovery. Engagement, dialogue, concession. Austin's freedom depends on it.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you again, Mr. Hill. Mr. Crow.
I'd be happy to yield my time to Ms. Stevens, who's doing a lot of this work. That's okay with you, Chairman.
Thank you all, gentlemen, for assembling this group that I wish just didn't have to be here. And it's very intentional. Russia, Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, Russia again, Nigeria, China. They're all coordinating in some respect. They are holding all of you hostage. They are holding your families hostage. This is a form of collective torture. And it's not acceptable. I think you bring up a very good point about coordinating at the international stage. Mr. Whelan of Michigan, designated wrongfully detained, holds 4 passports. So we've seen some of that coordination in action across a multitude of governments. And yet here we sit. This cannot be acceptable on the global stage. These are, in many respects, adversaries or sworn enemies, but it doesn't mean we cannot have dialogue. Mr. Hill's great questions about how to further exercise the tenets of the Levinson Act, which I truly think our Foreign Affairs Committee leadership and Mr. McCall and Mr. Meeks for just being such diligent partners rings so true here. I am curious, and I would like to know for the record in this room, when is the last time you spoke to your loved one? And when is the last time you know that the United States government spoke to your loved one? We know that in those communications, a lot of times what wants to be said cannot be said. We are being manipulated as a government and as a population if we do get the chance to speak. But I really believe it's important to hear it directly from you. And then lastly, Mr. Beckett, I just want to recognize it is so important that you are here as an employer. I will never forget the day that Paul Whelan was let go by his employer. And what happens, there's a whole back end that you as loved ones carry. Loss of home, loss of income, loss of dignity. Paul's dog has passed away, never got to say goodbye, things along those lines. And so I just encourage all of you at the Wall Street Journal, because it's costly to do what you are doing on behalf of Mr. Gershowitz and his family. But this is partly why when we passed the NDAA and included in the NDAA support and resources, I look at Debra. What would have that been like for you for 12 years to have the resources? Can you even access the resources because Austin's not designated wrongfully detained? What I'm talking about with resources is the financial support to come here, because we need to all hold the feet to the fire, those of us as members of Congress and on behalf of the administration. But if we can, I think it would be very important here, when is the last time you have spoken to your loved one, heard from your loved one, and when is the last known time that the United States government has access? And if you want to start, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your comments. And I do think your point about employers is well taken, because in so many of these cases, this is an issue for American business doing business overseas. If the U.S. government can't guarantee the safety of its citizens overseas, that has an impact on business. Evan has been corresponding with his parents and his family fairly regularly over the last year and 1 month, and he has received visits from Ambassador Lynn Tracy, U.S. Ambassador to Moscow, or another representative approximately every 4 or 5 weeks. In the beginning, it took a long time. I don't think his first visit was until near the end of May, so almost 2 months out, but since then, and we're very grateful for it, it's been approximately 5 weeks scheduled for embassy visits. He is awaiting a trial. We have no information, which is part of the frustration for his parents, on when any trial may take effect or any of the evidence that's been presented. Thank you.
Can I say something? We owe it to Zak Shaheen, my brother-in-law, who's in jail in Dubai, an ally country, for the last 16 years. He's on the 17th year now. He's 60 years old. He needs to serve another 40 years, 40. He will be 100. Then he will be released. It's an alleged financial crime. I'm not going to get into the details of is he guilty or not guilty. Just assume he's guilty of all charges, alleged financial crime, 56 years jail term. But we have all the proof that he's not guilty. I won't get into that. I will just say that he is seriously ill, both physically and mentally, and we've been screaming this out. The US government was convinced. In March 2023, they submitted an official request to the UAE government to release him on humanitarian grounds for medical reasons. It was submitted in March 2023. There is no response. That's what we get from the US government. What happened? You're convinced he's sick, he's dying. Where's the response? They're our friends. Can't Secretary Blinken or President Biden pick up the phone, talk to our friends? Or on a human reason, humanitarian thing. His family is waiting for him. We don't want him in a casket. We don't want him dead. We want him alive. Can the US government do something? You're convinced, you put it in writing, you sent this request. Just work on it, do something. You don't even label him as wrongfully detained, though the whole world has labeled him. We showed all the evidence. We showed lack of due process in Dubai. Is it just because it's an ally country? We don't want to touch them, we don't want to offend them, we don't want to wreck any trade thing? What is the reason? I mean, this should be an easy case. It's not like the other cases. Those countries are enemies, but this is an ally country. And we've got, all the proofs. We submitted tons of documents, and they just, yes, we hear compassion, but the guy is dying, literally dying. We don't want him back dead. His wife, my sister, has been waiting for him for the last 16 years, and that's his son. He was a kid, and his sister. They waited for him, and finally they got married last year without him. He didn't walk his daughter down the aisle. He missed their graduations. He missed everything. He's missing his life. That's all I can say. The US government can do a lot more. Give it more attention, take it seriously before he dies. Thank you.
My last call with Ryan was March 26th. That was 12 minutes long. We've had 5 calls in the last 628 days. He has received 2 visits by the Qataris, our protecting power with Afghanistan, and we're desperate to have him seen by a doctor as his health is declining, and hopeful for more contact. I've had 2 pictures that have come to me, and he looked, in the last one on December 25th, he had lost a lot of weight and looked really haggard and aged. So that's all the contact that we've had with him.
The last time I hugged Austin was January 2012 when I took him to the airport to come back to DC. And the last time I spoke to him was on his birthday, August 11th of 2012. The last time my husband spoke to him was the day before he was detained, August 13th of 2012, and that is, we've had no contact with Austin since he was detained.
So we're in a similar situation. The last time my mother had contact with my father was on February 14, 2017, when he let her know he had arrived to a family member's house in Damascus, Syria. And he told her, "I'll call you back soon." And he never did. It's been over 7 years. We've had no contact with him whatsoever. And we have had no U.S. official contact him as well, so no visits. Mm-hmm.
And from the U.S. has spoken to Austin, right? No one from the U.S. government has spoken to your son either, Deborah?
The last time we had a sign of life from my father was in October 15th. He was allowed one phone call with my mother. These are highly supervised phone calls, of course, with the regime agents sitting around them and stopping the call if we ask any kind of questions that they don't want to be asked, or if he's trying to give us any kind of information, because nobody knows where my father is being held. Nobody has seen him for the last 3.5 years. The German government, through the German embassy, has tried to reach out. They're not allowed to. As far as I know, the Swiss government hasn't even tried to reach out, and none of the officials have tried to reach out. I just wanted to add that being in solitary confinement for 1,350 days, we can't even imagine. I think everybody remembers being on lockdown for a couple of weeks during the pandemic in our own home. My father is now 192 weeks on lockdown without seeing sunlight, without talking to a human being that doesn't want to kill or torture him. So they're slowly killing him over there. And one more point, maybe if I may add to the designation through SPIHA. There's definitely something wrong with the process. We have had the UN Working Group of Arbitrary Detention designate my father wrongfully detained already in 2022. The UN is usually very, very slow because it has to go through all the lawyers. They did it before our State Department is doing it. When the 5 Americans were released last year in that prisoner swap, 3 of them were designated. 2 of them didn't even have a trial in Iran. They were there for a couple of months. They were released. So it seems like it is very arbitrary on who we're designating, when we're designating them, and who we're bringing back. So that's another point that I would like to have investigated and raised by you. Thank you.
My communication, even my written communication with Alsu is quite limited. Since her arrest in October last year, the Russian government has denied her phone calls with the family, so we haven't really interacted with Alsu. We have only heard her voice once when she was allowed to speak to journalists in court on April 1st, as she revealed a lack of basic amenities and inadequate medical care. The Kafkaesque absurdity of Alsu's situation is that she is accused of being an American agent, yet the Russian government has barred any access to consular staff in Moscow. So she hasn't been able to speak to anyone from the U.S. Embassy. 2 American diplomats have been able to travel. They were at a court hearing once, and Alsu was very happy to see friendly faces in the courtroom. But other than that, she has had no contact with consular staff.
They've called a vote for all of us. I'm going to recognize the remaining members, Mr. Crow and Mr. Issa, for any statements that they may have as well. We do thank you for taking the time to come and speak to all of us, for your engagement with us constantly. My statement on Americans being held abroad would simply be this: it's unacceptable. There should be every expectation that if you are an American, that there is an American coming to get you, Whether that's an American diplomat or an American shooter, that can be decided, but there should be an American coming to get you, and that should be the line for the United States of America. And that, I recognize my colleague, Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Chairman Mast and Chairman McCall for supporting and calling this hearing, and my other colleagues around the table who have done a lot of work for you all individually as well as generally on policy on this issue. This was an incredibly helpful and enlightening roundtable for me. I learned a lot, and I know it took a lot of courage to do this because some of you did not take lightly that decision to go public with your advocacy. I know some of you actually have struggled with that because there are trade-offs for the family and for your loved ones as well. So thank you for those of you who have made that decision, and for those of you who are listening to this hearing at home that are in similar situations, because there are families of loved ones who might be sitting at home. You are seen, you are heard by us. We are working diligently, and we will do everything possible to support your families and get your loved ones home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. Mr. Issa, anything you'd like to add?
There you go. Look, probably everything has been said by people while I was in another meeting. So I'll just suffice to say, you have our sympathy. You also have a recognition that we've concentrated on hostages in Gaza recently. We've looked at a lot of areas. Many of you, particularly Syria and Iran, your loved ones are in countries where we don't have diplomatic relations, Afghanistan too, and that makes it harder. But it doesn't give an excuse for us not to insist on, through counterparts, that any relationships that those countries want to have are contingent on putting at least the recognition, the well-being, and the visitation of your loved ones, and then ultimately the release. Russia's the classic example where there's always a price to trade somebody. If somebody's a spy, they're happy to trade for one of theirs. And that has been going on since before I was born. So this chairman and the chairman of the subcommittee stand ready to do any pressure we can on our country, but also on things. For example, I know Nigeria is not here right now, but we have an aid package to Nigeria, and that demands that there be some greater engagement. We still have diplomatic relations with China, and yet China ignores American human rights. So this committee does care about it. I want to thank you for being here. I'm sorry that I came in late from another committee, but my office is happy to follow up with any of you with specifics. Deborah, that would be particularly related to your son. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. Thank you to all of our family members and advocates, and we stand here ready for you. Thank you.
Yes. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
How you been? So you gotten any kind of updates since you were here for the Mufti conference? Yeah, you mentioned. Yeah. I bet like any engagement like with the state.
Excellent to see you again. See you again. But I mean, all said and done, I mean, what's been done here, getting the Masha Act passed, getting the SHIP Act passed. I mean, there's pushback here, so it's not like these guys are sitting on their asses.
Right.
Chad Brand, Mr. Chairman Council. So obviously here with Masha's case, Mr. Tice. But I mean, I found out you were on the list, so I'm like, oh. But no, I think this is really good. I thought the most instructive part of this is when Meeks was asking, what more can Congress do?
Yeah.
And it just seems to me, I think you guys made a big dent because Meeks seemed really touched. And when he came over to talk to McCall at the end, I think there's going to be some kind of momentum on this. Good job. Sure. Oh, it's okay.
Gazelle, you were great. Did you see the candidate? Yes, I did see the video. The one that you said, the state designation, that one I wasn't taking in, but I think the first one is, yeah, I hope it's going to be consistent. We can do it somewhere with a good customer. Hi, Arthur. Carol Shahid, how are you? With Mr. J. Nice to meet you. He's working with Jason. Jason. He is doing well. So, well, he told me, I think when he said supposedly we told you that oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yep, you did. Jason No. This is a mistake. I was talking to Jason because his congressman did not step up. Who's congressman? Kane for Shahab Dalili. No, but from this which state? It's 11th. Virginia 11th district. Oh, okay. He came to town. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see you in Germany.
In Germany.
Brussels.
Yes. I'll try to make
I'm
it.
really paid
Thank you.
So no problem whatsoever. It's just been a while, particular case. No, I mean, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you. So, yeah, absolutely. This is one of those events that I never want to repeat. Like, I would love to not see you ever again, right? Like, that means we were successful. So, like, I really do hope that, like, this has moved the needle. I know, as, speaking for Chairman McCall, being able to, it's not often that we get to get him for an hour and a half to 2 hours nearly to be here, and he thought this was an excellent event. So I know, like, now these cases all have personal attention at our level. We've been tracking them, of course, but, like, you now have members who were here the whole time who know your entire story and can advocate for that. So that's the next step. So we'll start. You made a good point about the oversight of the process and some other stuff there. We're hoping to do more on that now. Now that we've heard from you all, talking to state about how we can improve this and how we can start moving on some of these specific cases that haven't gotten as much movement.
Stay tuned, we may have a hearing soon.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
We'll do it with folks from the state.
Yes.
And so we'll try to.
No, but I just wrote my email down.
Okay,
That's my title. I do have cards.
So we'll keep you updated too. I mean, like whenever that sort of hearing gets scheduled or whatever the next steps are, we'll make sure that you all are aware. And if able to be here in the audience or with him or with members, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you.
That would be we'll keep you updated.
Yes.
That would be
perfect. So helpful. Thank you.
No, Jason knows about it. Yeah.
We have other.
I know Cuba. And
Oh yeah, that one is a good one. That one in particular.
Good.
You have your card I can borrow?
I don't have one on me. If you, yeah, I'll either do this or I can grab one.
No, just write that.
That way I'll figure out who